There's only one thing I would say about my character. I think I'm an optimist. And if anybody suggests anything, I just think, yes, on it, let's have a go at that. I trained as a painter, but I then figured there wasn't any future in that. And I moved over into design and worked for a bit in advertising. Then I set up as a photographer. Then I got bored with that, doing sort of commercial work and stuff, and I had an idea for doing a book about wildflowers. That was my first book, and I did that 45 years ago, or whatever it was. And since then, I've been doing books on all kinds of plants, roses, mushrooms, shrubs, perennials. I've certainly published in excess of 45, more or less a book a year. Right in the middle of March winds, but this is the time the Alexander shoots. It's a biannual plant that came over with the Romans. They used to call it Roman celery. And it's a wonderful edible, and you need it sort of fresh and young like this. It grows along the Thames embankment. You can eat it fresh like this, or you can steam it and eat it rather like asparagus. For the last couple of years, I've been working on another of my favourite themes, which is foraging. And I'd written a book called Wild Food on Foraging 20 years ago, which is still in print. And I wanted to look into the whole subject more. So I started searching about what Japanese people did when they were foraging, what the Germans do, what the Italians do, what the Arabs do. So I've ended up doing a book covering sort of worldwide foraged things, lots of which we actually grow in England as garden plants, funnily enough, like dahlias, which were food plants originally. Now they're everywhere and common, almost vulgar. I've dug up a typical dahlia, and in fact there are about 50 tubers on it. I'm going to take 40 to eat and put the others back in the garden, and next year we'll have flowers all over the place. The books have probably sold about 6 or 7 million altogether, so that there are a lot of people out there who know about the books. There seems to be a younger generation who are interested in particular things. In mushrooms, they're interested in eating them, they're interested in the medicinal properties of mushrooms, and they're also a bit interested in the psychedelic mushrooms as well. That actually I'm not very interested in, but obviously you learn about it as well. So I do talk about that when I do talks and when I wander about with people. We're in North Wales having great fun at the Good Life Experience Festival, which is a brilliant little festival. 4 or 5 years ago we came for the first time, and we went out mushrooming in the woods, and we found loads of mushrooms, seps and all sorts of edibles. And so since then we've been doing a mushroom walk. So about 100 people roll up, and we all go out in the woods and collect whatever we can find, and then I try and pick out the edibles, and we cook them and have a little feast. The French call it langue de bœuf, tongue of a cow.
This is brilliant, isn't it? How many?
Actually never heard of anyone eating.
Okay, no.
Don't, Georgia.
It's not worth it.
This is a giant earth ball. That one is dry, and so there are the spores.
And that
There, now we've distributed about 2,000 spores at a puff, I should think.
It's horrible to feel. I'm not a good one.
When you cut it in half, you see the beginnings of the fungus. You're starting out on that. I think we should put some of the lardons in with this. Yes, in
Which
this.
one is going to be for the vegan?
That's going to be for vegans.
Right.
Most of them are going to be for vegans.
You're keeping your butter here and...
Ah, butter. I've forgotten about butter. Okay. Oh, God. I'm in trouble now. I started looking at mushrooms and realised how vast the sort of world of fungi was altogether. And then I thought, I wonder if I could do a book on this. And I went to the publishers and I thought they'd say, no, no one's interested in mushrooms, get out of it, Phillips. But they didn't. They said, yeah, we'll do a book on mushrooms. And I agreed to do a book, 2 years or something, and it was going to be 300 or 400 mushrooms. After 2 years, I went back to them and I said, I need another 2 years. I'm up to 700 already. And then I went back again, and eventually it was about 8 or 9 years study that became the book, and it had 1,200 different mushrooms in it, collections of the mushrooms. So each mushroom in the book is represented by 4 or 5 specimens. So when the 1,200, that's actually 7,000 or 8,000 mushrooms that were photographed for the book. I love farmers' markets. I mean, I'm sort of down on supermarkets. You know, you never have a personal relationship. When you go to a market, you get to know the people and you get to trust them, and they'll tell you, this is particularly good, this, eat that, don't bother with that bit. They help you, and it's not like in a supermarket where you just look at this plastic pack and take it away. Borough Market in particular I love, and they have a really quite extensive section on fungi. A couple of them keep truffles and so on, but you can go there and find different truffles and different edible fungi, mainly from Britain. I've always wanted to live in London. I was born in the suburbs in Uxbridge, and just travelling every day to go to art school drove me completely potty. I mean, about at least an hour and a half each way, so 3 hours of my day travelling, and I thought, when I get a job, I ain't doing that no more. So ever since then, I've lived in the middle of London. In my early books, I didn't do food at all. That came quite a bit later, after I'd done the main sections of plants, the trees and mosses and the fungi and everything. I thought, now I'm going to do a book showing what you can do, which ones you can eat. The book is going to feature a series of strange or wild food or garden foods, and many of them I prepared sort of what I hope are interesting recipes. And this is one of them. These 2 strange roots. Sounds like a title for a Billie Holiday number, doesn't it? Strange roots. And so this is the parsley root and the chervil root with turmeric on. I'm now arranging them because I'm going to photograph them ready like this for my book. Hang on, I've got to go and get a camera. The second book I did with Martin Ricks was a book on roses. And it was sort of, I suppose, coincidence that roses became very fashionable at that time, and there were rose societies all over the world. So when the book was finally published, I went to Australia and New Zealand and America doing talks on roses. Okay, Murray, I'm going to just take you around the garden a bit. I'm going to take you to a climbing rose. This is brilliant because he's about 6 feet taller than me, and I can't reach this one, so there we are. Oh, that's stunning, isn't it? Absolutely stunning. It's an old tea rose. I love using flowers in salads. This is one of the things people don't know you eat, although I gather the Dutch ate them during the war. Tulips, you can eat the bulbs, but they're rather horrible. But the flowers are lovely. I'm just putting a little bit of Stilton in each sort of package. I'm going to hack the base of the stem off. Yeah, the cheese is melting.
That flame. I think we're done. I think they look perfect.
But the smell is wonderful, isn't it? Yeah, let's see.
Beautiful.
Wow. Thinking of putting them in the salad, and you often can put the petals in the salad and they get a sort of lovely aroma for the salad. But
we have
let's
other
try
petals,
and do a dish
Yeah.
of it.
We'll start with the elderberry vinegar.
Salt. Okay.
Now I'm going to go for a drizzle of the Portuguese extra virgin from your friend out there. You've obviously got all the right friends in all the right places. Roger. As you say, the combination of the colour of the pink of the rose and the burnt orange of the paprika are looking gorgeous together. Wow, amazing.
No, this vinegar is...
Yep.
There's something almost... It feels almost slightly illegal to be doing this to me. I don't know why. Eating roses.
Yeah.
A man was convicted of eating roses and sentenced to community service.
Yeah. Yep. Going to eat this last bit with my fingers. Murray, it's just too good to waste. Amazing. I did a television programme on the history of roses right back to discovering the first archaeological evidence of them 50,000 years ago, hopefully up to the modern day, and including people like the wonderful David Austin. David Austin is the most marvellous rose breeder that put together old-fashioned roses, the old Gallicas and Albas of Europe, with the modern Chinese roses, which repeat flower. So you've now got the beautiful flowers, the scent and the repeat flowering. And David's created a whole new world of roses. Michael's going to show us all around the nursery and how it all works and how it's developed into the vast thing it now is. There's a sad note to the story. David died about 2 weeks ago. So I feel I really want to put something special in our garden at Eccleston Square, commemorating David's wonderful contribution. We had paella on Sunday, and they served us this paella. It had the chicken's head and the feet sticking up out of it, which is, I'm afraid I haven't.
You haven't been able to replicate today.
I haven't been able to replicate that. I suppose I am fascinated by fire. Is it sort of like witchcraft or something? I don't know. But I love to cook on an outdoor wooden fire. It's quite different. It makes cooking and eating all of a sort of wonderful adventure. You know, people say, why have you done this? Why have you moved to that or dropped this and gone on to that? And I think it is a question of, I was lucky to have loads of energy and could keep going longer than lots of other people of my contemporaries or so on. So I've just kept on going. So I'm 86 and I'm still, I hope, going reasonably strong. Okay, what I want is everybody on the other side of the table.
Okay.
I'm just serving some plates up. I'll move in just a second.
I'm very keen on jazz as well. Humphrey Lyttelton said if he felt ill, but he had to play a gig, he felt better. He called it the gig cure. And it's that having to work, having set yourself the task to do something, you put aside all the feelings of your aching body and just concentrate on it. So get down to it and try and get deeply into it, whatever it is you're trying to do.
Roger, you're obviously most well known for being an expert on mushrooms, but you're also an accomplished artist and photographer. Can you tell me what came first and how the others evolved?
The art came first. I studied at Chelsea School of Art back about 3 centuries ago, when it was a tiny little place and was really wonderful. Everybody knew everybody and it was inspiring. But at the end of my career in the art school, the actual painting I'd been taught didn't seem to lead anywhere. So I went into advertising as an art director, designer. And then I spent, I suppose, the next 10 years designing and working on ads. We had some quite good clients, some quite important clients, and most of them, the ones I liked best, were booze clients. So we had Smirnoff vodka and whiskey, Gilbey's gin, and anyway, a bunch of that stuff. I then started getting bored with advertising, and I'd seen all these guys around me making a fortune. I was hiring them to do photographs, and they were charging a fortune, more than I was probably earning in a year in 2 days. So I gave up advertising, I set up in a photographic studio and started doing photography. That went well for a couple of years. I did all sorts of stuff. And then through another thing, which was that I had separated from my wife and got together with Nikki. And our son, my son with my first wife, was about 5 or 6, and his feet never got dirty. He'd become a little town boy. And I objected to this, so I set in motion where we all went out to the country every Saturday or Sunday, and we cooked our food out of over an open fire. And he originally, of course, with him, and he'd normally bring a friend. Eventually, we would have about 18 or 20 of us, the friends, and sometimes their parents, and whatever, relations. And so a big mob of us would go out into the country and cook our food over an open fire and have a brilliant time. And out of that came my first book, because all the kids were asking me, what's this plant and what's that plant, and I couldn't answer them. So I started collecting all the plants I found in 1 year, and I pressed them all and had the whole sequence. And then I thought, what the hell am I doing this for? I'm a photographer. I'll do the same thing, only in photographs. So I did the equivalent of pressed flowers, but not pressed, in photographs, which, when you look at it, is the same thing as doing botanical drawing, really, only botanical photographs. And I did them in sequence for the year. So the first photograph's in January, and it goes right through the year. And I was breaking some sort of mold doing that, because in the past botanists had always done plant books, so they started out by saying, is it a composite? I didn't know what a composite was. I was taking photographs of these plants and getting an identification on them. And the important thing to me was when it came into flower, what it looked like, and eventually getting a name for it. So that led to my very first book, Wildflowers of Britain. I got it published through Pan Books, and it took off, and ever since then I've been doing books, and I've done 40 or something.
And tell us how you got into mushrooming.
Mushrooming was along the way. When I was completing the first book, I had to do the sort of autumn flowers, particularly the orchids and hellebores and so on, that flower from summer to autumn in the woods. And in searching for them, I found loads of mushrooms. And I thought I knew about mushrooms, but I didn't. I knew about field mushrooms, and that was about it. And so I started trying to study them. And the Mycological Society organise outings every weekend of the season. There's one on Saturday, one on Sunday, and I just, for 2 or 3 years, I would go on these things and nag whoever was running the foray to tell me what the hell this was. And then I'd take them home and study and read up about them. I had a name, I would photograph them. The early photographs were junk, but later I would use the photographs. And so I started building up photographs, and then I would go out much more on my own and collect things. I was very matey with the people at Kew, so everything in my book has been checked by Kew. So as far as we know, it's all good, top-rate identification. Doesn't mean there isn't a bummer in there somewhere. There probably is.
And do you still enjoy hunting for mushrooms?
Yeah.
What is it about them?
What the heck are we doing here? Hunting for mushrooms that don't exist. Yes, I enjoy hunting for mushrooms. I mean, they're good. I enjoy eating them. Frowned upon by some academics, I know, but I enjoy eating them. And I love the mythology around them, the stories and the, finding truffles and the adventures of it.
Which leads me to my next question. Why do you happen to be here in Cuba 2 this week?
Well, because the idea was we would all come down and go out hunting mushrooms. We knew it was going to be a great spot, and we bought loads of baskets to fill up. And then we were going to sit around with tables piled full of mushrooms, chatting about them, making sure everybody could identify them. Then our wonderful cook was going to produce his masterworks with them. But we've come down here, it's hotter than it's been all summer, and it's a bust.
You're still inspired to produce works of art, as I can see.
Yeah.
Why do you enjoy art so much?
I don't know. I mean, it's sort of something that actually seems to come natural to me. Painting and drawing and mucking about with colour and things. And as now I'm doing little on the book side. We're running websites and doing apps, but books are more or less out of the picture now. Publishers don't want to do that. It's been overtaken by the web, really. So I'm not basically doing books, and I've returned to having much more time to do painting and drawing, which I'm doing and loving. I have always had an interest in American Indians and their trials and troubles, since reading Howard Fast's Last Frontier when I was 17. But right now, it is the plight of the Nez Perce that has been fascinating me for some years. Currently, I've been working on a series of drawings, paintings and woodcuts in my studio in Bermondsey. I started with a large piece featuring 100 names of the principal warriors and continued making drawings of all the men I could find from ancient photographs. The Nez Perce, Ni Mi Pu, in their Shahaptian language, meaning the people. When Lewis and Clark first met with the people, there were over 6,000 members of the various tribal bands. But by 1877, disease and deprivation had halved that number. The tribe was made up of a series of self-sustaining bands, each with a designated home territory spreading over parts of what is now Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. Their pervading belief was that the land sustained all things in a circular system of seasons and birth, death, and rebirth. In the summer of 2014, Nicky and I travelled the whole route of the Nez Perce March, and I did drawings and took photographs to work from later. The majority of the Nez Perce traditional land was conceded to the people in a treaty of 1855. Only a few of the chiefs signed and agreed to this treaty. By 1863, the pressure of incomers was so great that the government in Washington proposed a new treaty, limiting the Nez Perce lands to only 10% of the original treaty. This left a large number of the people's traditional dwelling places outside the reservation. These bands became known as the non-treaty Nez Perce. A few years later, attempting to get these non-treaty bands into the actual new reservation, there was a big powwow, and reluctantly the bands conceded and moved towards the new treaty lands. When making camp outside the reservation, preparing to go in, 3 young men went to seek vengeance for the murder of the father of one of them, a murder that white justice had not dealt with. In searching for the killer, they killed 2 other white men. This caused the army to dispatch troops to bring in the marauders. I've divided the trail that the Nez Perce followed whilst fighting the army into 4 sections. I call the first Joy and Freedom. As the army approached the Nez Perce camp in Whitebird Canyon, the people sent out a deputation to parley under a white flag, but the American army fired on the delegation without warning. These shots triggered the whole war. The Indians retaliated and totally overwhelmed the US Army, killing 34 men and causing the whole force to run for their lives, dropping arms and ammunition as they went. In this engagement, only 2 Nez Perce were slightly wounded. The Indians fought with the help of their personal Wayakin. A Wayakin is a spirit guide that each brave had. The next incident was another offence by the army. They attacked Chief Lookingglass's village. It was actually within the reservation, and he had rejected the thought of joining up with the non-treaty bands. 2 weeks after the Whitebird battle, the army attacked his unsuspecting village. This took Lookingglass's band completely unawares, and they quickly dispersed into the brush. No one knows how many Indians were killed in this incident, but the army, and especially the volunteers that joined the army, ransacked the village. As Nicky and I passed through the various locations, I drew some of the local plants, many of which are edible. The result of this attack on the unprepared village containing 120 or more women and children was that Lookingglass, a wise and very experienced warrior, decided to join the non-treaty force. Bringing all the women and children with him and what was left of his large horse herd, the army had run off a substantial number.
A day or two after the attack on Looking Glass's village, skirmishing was taking place between the army and the main Indian force, and the Indians attacked and annihilated a small advance guard of 13 men at Cottonwood. The main Indian camp by this time, numbering about 800 men, women and children with all their animals, including 2,000 horses, was near the Clearwater River in Idaho. The army attempted to surround the encampment, but the braves managed to hold off the army force whilst non-combatant and chiefs moved the whole village over the river to safety. Eventually, only 2 men held the army at bay, Yellow Wolf and Wautolan. Casualties were low on both sides during this long engagement. As the Nez Perce left the Clearwater River, they passed by the heart of the monster.
The story of the birth of the Nez Perce people. Coyote found out that the people had been eaten by the monster, so he sought out the monster and challenged him to eat him too. When inside the monster, he lit a fire to melt the fat around the monster's heart. The monster tried to expel him, but failed. So Coyote, using all his 5 knives, tried to cut out the monster's heart. Finally, after all the knives were broken, he was able to rip the heart out. As the monster died, all the people, together with the bones of the dead and Coyote himself, escaped. Coyote smeared the monster's blood over the bones, and they came back to life. Coyote then carved up the monster and distributed the parts all over the country. From each part, another nation was born. After it was done, Fox said to Coyote, "You have created all the tribes, but not the Nez Perce people." So Coyote took water and washed his bloody hands and sprinkled the bloody water around where the monster's heart lay, and from those drops the Nez Perce people were born.
Part 2, Struggle and Patience. The Nez Perce bands climbed to the Weippe Prairie, an area they knew well because it was here that the different bands would meet annually to gather camas bulbs. The bulbs were baked, stored and kept as a major part of their diet. Only young men of about 17 were permitted to fight. Men over 35 or 40 were considered too old. The journey over the rugged terrain of the Bitterroot Mountains was incredibly difficult, with all the animals and old people. They had to find their way through the badly marked trails, but it proved nearly impossible for the army who were attempting to follow them. By the time they got to the other side, the Nez Perce had many days' lead. The exact location of the route over the mountains is not known in detail. These pictures give some idea of the terrain. With 2,000 animals in tow, they had to try every night to find a spot to camp where there was sufficient grazing for the animals to be fed. Chief Hartalukin was the leader of a band of Palouse Indians, closely related to the Nez Perce, but also being driven off their land. When they came down into Montana on the other side of the mountains, their way was blocked by another military force which had been summoned by telegraph to cut them off. Looking Glass tried to negotiate a passage past the little fort they had erected, but in the end, with comparative ease, the whole convoy was able to bypass the fort, which became known as Fort Fizzle. Once into Montana, the bands believed that they were well away from the army that was following them, and quite safe. They camped in the Big Hole Valley, where there was plenty of grass for all the horses and cattle to be rested and fattened up for the next stage of the journey. However, one brave, Wautolan, had a vision. His vision was that the army would attack the camp, and he warned Chief Looking Glass. Part 3 I've named Disillusionment and Determination. Wautolan proved to be correct, because though they were days ahead of the following troops, another contingent from Montana discovered where they were camped and crept up on the village and attacked, just as dawn was breaking, firing into the teepees whilst everyone was asleep. Many women and children died as a result of this attack. It was something that the Indians found difficult to comprehend, as war in their culture was between grown men. From this point on, the tribes realized that it was total war and that every white person was the enemy. Rainbow was one of the most revered of the warriors. It was said that his Waiakin would protect his life in daylight. He could never be hit by a bullet while the sun was up. The brave saw the truth in this when he was killed before daylight, as dawn was breaking at Big Hole. Despite this surprise attack, the braves rallied and drove the invaders back from the camp, eventually capturing their field gun and driving the main force up into the hills. Pio Pio Tholect was one of the braves who helped capture the artillery. After the escape from Big Hole, the bands decided to change the leader. Looking Glass was thought to be too slow and had failed to recognize the possibility of a separate column of troops attacking them from another direction. It was decided to make Poker Joe the trail leader. He was a man who had travelled often in the area and knew the trails very well. Poker Joe instigated getting started on the march every day at about 5 o'clock in the morning, and they attempted to travel in the region of 19 miles every day to keep ahead of the following army. The next major incident was about 80 miles further on, in the area known as Camas Meadows. The Nez Perce realized that the army was camped only a few miles behind them, so a small group of braves rode back to the army camp at night and ran off what they thought was a horse herd. Actually, it was the mules, but the effect was exactly the same, as without the mules to pull the supply wagons, the army was immobilized. After this, the bands moved rapidly on towards Yellowstone Park, again with a lead of many days. Whilst travelling through the park, the Indians did not travel as a single group. They tended to break into their separate bands, each searching out grazing for its animals. Also, this allowed them to send out separate hunting parties to replenish their meat supply. After many days in Yellowstone, they decided to break out and aim north for the Canadian border with a view of joining Sitting Bull and his extremely large force of Sioux. Part 4, Capitulation and Achievement. Again, they had to outwit another military force which had been sent to block their exit from Yellowstone. The army kept watch on the approaching Indians, mainly using scouts from local tribes. The army intelligence encouraged them to foregather at the mouth of a valley out of the mountains, but the Nez Perce got wind of the army disposition and were able to escape by a second valley and thus avoid conflict. Passing northwards into Montana, they came to a narrow creek with steep rocky outcrops on both sides. It was a race for the braves to get there before the army, but they did, and they set up a withering fire on the army, allowing the rest of the animals and the women and children to pass by into the creek. They then held this advantage point, giving the rest of the families time to get well away. And in fact, the army at this point lost heart and retreated. During the next part of the journey, they were often harassed by Crow and Bannock tribes, who, with the encouragement of the army, were trying to steal their horses. This was very upsetting for the tribesmen, as a few years before the Nez Perce had helped the local Crows fight off a major Sioux attack, and they had presumed that the Crows would welcome and aid them. Near present-day Lewistown, there was a trading post set up by Reed and Bowles. The Indians stopped here and tried to trade for flour and other essentials. Finally, the column reached the Missouri River near Cow Island Crossing, where there was a depot of provisions that had been left to be transported further on by horse. The Indians asked to buy some of the supplies, but when this was refused, they took them by force from a small detachment of soldiers that was attempting to guard them. They passed on after this incident and passed over Bear Paw Mountains and camped about 40 miles south of the Canadian border. All the people, and especially their horses, were in very bad condition by this time because of the rush travel that Poker Joe had instigated. Looking Glass again spoke up for a rest break, and it was agreed that they were well ahead of the main army, so they decided to take a break to allow everyone to recuperate. This delay proved to be the end of the Freedom March for most of the people. The delay was a mistake. It allowed Colonel Miles and a large force to unexpectedly approach the encampment from a westerly direction. On the morning of the 30th of September, Miles mounted a three-pronged attack. The Indians had only scant warning of the cavalry charge, enough time for the braves to grab their guns and rush to the defence of the village. The first charge caused dreadful losses on both sides. 20 army men were killed and 52 wounded. On the Nez Perce side, the number of men lost was not quite so large, but it included 3 chiefs who were immensely important in the whole force. Chief Ollicott, the battle leader of the biggest band, was caught in the open at the first wave of the attack. Chief Tuhuhu Zoti, leader of another band and a religious leader of the Nez Perce, was killed at a point of rocks. Chief Looking Glass himself stood up from a trench he was fighting from and was hit by a sniper. The third wave of Miles' attack was very successful. They managed to run off the horse herd of the Nez Perce, making it therefore impossible for the majority of the tribesmen to carry on. Shortly after the beginning of this attack, Poker Joe was mistaken by Nez Perce and shot. After the heavy losses the army sustained in the first precipitous charge, Miles decided that a frontal attack was too costly against such fierce and effective resistance. He decided that he would employ siege tactics and wait them out. After 5 more days, on the 5th of October, Chief Joseph, who was the senior remaining leader still alive, took the decision to bring the war to an end. This was not universally agreed, and Chief Whitebird took the opportunity to escape to Canada with some 150 followers. The remaining men, women and children surrendered to Colonel Miles, who had agreed that after handing in their arms they could return to their own country. However, this agreement was overridden by General Sherman in Washington, who was a man searching for a form of the ultimate solution, and they were sent to Oklahoma to live in a malarial swamp where many of them died. In his submission speech, Chief Joseph is reported to have said, "Hear me, my chiefs. I am tired, my heart is sick and sad. From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever."
last 100 years, our relationship with food has changed dramatically. Today, if we want fresh ingredients, we just pop to the local supermarket. But it was only a few generations ago that people regularly turned to the edibles on their doorstep. And all these natural finds would now be considered superfoods because of their associated health benefits. But back then, they didn't come with the hefty price tag. The good news is that wild food is still everywhere, on the beach, at the bottom of your garden, even on the roadside. It's delicious, it's packed full of nutrients, and best of all, it's free. You just need to know what you're looking for. We're here in County Cork, Ireland, where all year round, Mother Nature's larder is bursting with flavoursome, versatile produce. And to help me identify which treasures this region has to offer is Britain's very own foraging expert, Roger Phillips. With over 20 books published on the subject, he's dedicated his life to sharing his incredible knowledge, amassing millions of followers along the way, and has been instrumental in putting wild food back on the menu. Roger.
Rachel, hi, great to see you.
Great to see you too. Roger, you really are the modern day original forager.
Now you're embarrassing me.
No, you are.
Well,
I've had your mushroom book for, I'd say, nearly 30 years.
I mean, it's over 30 years ago I wrote my wild food book. And now I think it's time for another look at it. And I now think of them as super wild foods.
So, what have we got here?
Yeah, let me show. It's a wonder plant. It's sea beet. It has an enormous strong root that goes down. It grows all along the coastal areas right throughout the British Isles. Very common, very easy to find, and it's absolutely delicious. But the important thing is it's a parent of beetroot. This is the plant from which beetroot has been developed.
Oh.
Sugar beet has been developed from this. The actual plant can be grown to form Swiss chard. So it's a parent of all these things. I mean, it is all those things.
Wow, amazing.
The same thing. Yeah. Apart from all the sort of wonderful history of it, it's terrifically good for health. It contains a high quantity of magnesium, and that's very good for relaxing the heart muscles. It's an anti-stress plant.
Oh,
and look how
we'll
important
have some of that.
stress is in the modern life. That's right.
Great. Well, I think Dorina would be delighted if we pick some of this. Okay. Fantastic.
Right, let's go for it. Okay, Rachel. This is the sort of area I've been hoping to find, because these sort of wood edges and sort of lighter areas, the edge of wood, are ideal places for wild garlic.
Great. I love wild garlic.
Yeah, absolutely stunning. Right, here we go. Miles. Or loads and loads of it. Are we going to collect some for?
Absolutely. I'll get some of the leaves.
Okay, I'll collect some flowers. This wild garlic is actually the best of the whole onion family for blood conditions, for thinning the blood. And all onions do that, but wild garlic has the perfect chemicals for doing that. Fantastic.
Look at that. Gorgeous.
Yep, leaves,
yeah.
flowers.
Are we going to pick
fantastic.
some of the other one, the three-cornered leek?
Yeah, this one
That one.
isn't nearly as traditional, but it's also gorgeous. I actually love this one in salads.
It's lovely. You find this more than in woodlands. You find it more in the ditches of roads in Ireland.
Yeah.
They look like white bluebells, don't they?
Yeah, they look like white bluebells, and the way you tell the difference is it's three-cornered.
Yes.
It's called three-cornered leek. It has
Trifecta.
triangular stems. So,
Okay.
enough? Yeah.
Great.
Okay, let's see what
What
else we
next?
can find. Primroses here.
Lovely. They're so pretty. I might pick a few of these because they make everything look pretty.
Oh yeah, that would be lovely, wouldn't it?
Yeah. as long as you don't take the root.
Yeah, don't dig up the plant, ruin the poor old environment.
Oh, and look, here's some little violets. Should I get a couple of
you've
those?
got violets here too?
They're violets,
Yeah.
aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah,
Sweet.
cute.
Should I just
you
take
pick
just
them,
take a
yeah.
few? They're so pretty. Look.
Your violets are so pretty, aren't they? Yep. Elderflower. It's one of the most important and common plants, really.
It's early, isn't it? Middle of May.
It's just the beginning. I mean, look, you see, this isn't out, that's out. Yeah, that amazing strong smell. I always used it for making what we called elderflower champagne, which you're not allowed to say anymore. Real thing about it is it has this natural yeast. You just bung it in some water and sugar. A couple of days later, it starts to go. It actually is a terrifically helpful plant. It contains antiviral properties, antibacterial properties, and scientists are working on it at the moment to see if it can be used to solve problems that you get in hospital like MRSA.
Really?
It's incredibly important. Super plant.
Wow.
Okay. Well, it's early in the year for it. It probably normally would be in full flower at the end of May.
Yeah.
But let's take it anyway. We can add it to our basket.
Great. Now, look what we have, Dorina.
Hi. You've been foraging. Busy, busy. What did you
Loads
get?
of garlic.
Yeah.
Yep. Elderflowers, primroses, and the king of them all, the seaweed.
You've been down at the beach as well as everywhere else.
Yeah.
We've been everywhere.
Gorgeous things. We have been everywhere.
So, now, let's see, can we make lunch out of this? Well, I could make a wild garlic soup, or I could actually make a wild garlic pesto to go on a soup. So maybe we could make some seaweed soup. Would that be good?
Yeah.
That would be very good.
Delicious.
And then we could, I might use the wild garlic to make a wild garlic pesto.
Yes,
And we'll just
fantastic.
let over a bit of pasta, okay?
Yep.
Do we like the sound of that?
Sounds like a great lunch.
Put your feet up for a while. And Rachel and I will cook up a little forage feast for you.
Sounds
How about
fantastic. I can't wait.
that? How cute is that? I think Roger might be impressed. What
He
do you
might
think?
be.
Do you think we can? That's good.
Great. Well, I've had my feet up waiting for this, and I'm excited to get a good taste of it.
Good. Because there are all those vitamins and minerals and trace elements in it as well.
Absolutely. It's superfood.
Actually, that's one of the, what I often think it's one of the most important things about forage foods is they haven't been in any way tampered with. So they have all their
They're all organic.
vitamins and minerals and trace elements and a lot of the things that are missing from our mass-produced food now.
That's it.
Now some pasta with wild garlic pesto. Are you ready for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Decorate it with
I'm going to put another tiny little bit on top like that. And then I can sprinkle, and yes, we have wild garlic flowers on top as well.
Yeah.
I leave that little bit just in case you want a second helping.
Oh, absolutely scrummy.
Isn't that so good? It really is.
Yeah. Hit me with that.
Would you like a little bit? Would you like some pesto?
Yeah, that'll do it.
Another little bit?
No, I'm fine, I think. Yeah. And so quick and easy that now. Takes a couple of minutes to make the wild garlic pesto. And
Please. Thank you, darling.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dorina, would you like some of your gorgeous elderflower infused
I
carrageen moss
certainly
pudding?
would.
Roger.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And how about, would you be partial to a little bit of elderflower?
I would.
cream?
I might get shocked, but I am partial to it.
Good. Hey, how delicious is this?
That's really good.
Yum,
It's just a really
yum.
nice set, isn't it? That'll be what.
Do we like that, Roger?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, well, absolutely amazing. Ireland altogether is amazing. Now we're going to go to England and see what we can find.
I'm very excited about that. That's our
I
next
think
stop.
at Dorset we're going.
Great.
Right.
In the 1830s, Cubitt designed and built many of the houses which surround the Grade 2 listed 3-acre garden called Eccleston Square. At one time, Winston Churchill lived in one of those houses. Perhaps he even took his morning stroll in the stunning garden. Our guide today is the Honorary Garden Manager, Roger Phillips, MBE, author of over 30 books on plants and gardening, passionate plantsman and loving custodian of Eccleston Square.
The actual garden was laid out by Thomas Cubitt in about 1830, so it's nearly 200 years old. When I took over 40 years ago, I tried at first planting a few plants, as one would. They all died. And the reason was the soil had been neglected since the war. Took me 2 or 3 years. We mulched the whole garden with spent hops. Here we go, wonderful, more rain for gardeners. I started out the original planting with camellias that do terribly well in the shade here, and they flower from January through to about April. In out of the rain, I'm going to show you some of the tender plants that we've been growing. This is Cleanthus puniceus from New Zealand. It's called carcabeak after a New Zealand bird, presumably the kaka bird. This is an echium after 2 years, growing to its full height of about 12 feet. And this is the kaka beak I spoke of in the greenhouse. And you see the flowers actually looks exactly like the beak of a parrot. I took the decision to plant climbing roses all around the netting, around the tennis court. So the tennis court is essentially a giant rose arbor. Here is one of our lovely yellow roses. This one is Golden Wings. One of our brilliant, wonderful ceanothus from the coast of California, and they do wonderfully. We, in fact, have a national collection of ceanothus, and we're the ceanothus kings. Having worked on it for 40 years, it lives with you. It becomes a sort of living sculpture. So there's something happening all the time, which is wondrous. There are 3 major forms of life on Earth. There are animals and there are plants, and the third force is mushrooms. I am absolutely passionate about mushrooms. They're the most important element in the total ecology. Animals live on plants, and basically plants live through the support that the fungi give them. Without them, the whole world would collapse. I've seen examples in America where they've clear-cut the forest and then replanted, but you get horribly stunted little trees because they haven't got the mushroom relationship, is dead because they clear-cut it. So the trees don't thrive after that. There are many poisonous wild mushrooms. The deathcap is the principal one. It's a green mushroom about the size of an ordinary field mushroom, and not that dissimilar if you're colourblind. There's also, of course, this question of the chanterelle. Nicholas Evans ate, by mistake, a webcap mushroom, which is a terrifically poisonous mushroom that affects the kidneys. You eat this mushroom and you 4, 5, 10 days later you go yellow and you've knackered your kidneys.
that was eaten by mistake for the chanterelle. So in the world of mushrooms, there are things you can eat by mistake for some of the most famous of the edible mushrooms. It's a dangerous world to fool around in. The vast majority of mushrooms fruit in the autumn. So from sometime like August through to November is the best time. Even at this time of year, there are mushrooms in my garden. This is a very squidgy looking ink cap. The thing about ink caps is they're what's called auto-digest, so they turn into black ink. And it's rumoured that Leonardo da Vinci used to draw with them. But there's another thing about this particular one. If you eat it and drink alcohol, you'll feel you're at death's door. It's absolutely ghastly, and it's called the tippler's bane. Spring is a very exciting time. There are only 2 or 3 mushrooms. There's St. George's mushroom, which is a lovely white one, but there's also morel, which is a fantastic mushroom. They come in black and yellow colours, but it has a wonderful, wonderful flavour, and French chefs adore it. The Marie, they call it, and they go absolutely mad for it, which is why you pay such high prices. The mushroom that you find and eat or poison yourself with is actually a fruit body of the plant. The plant is in the soil, but it's incredibly fine. It's called mycelium, and it's very, very fine strands. You can't see them with the naked eye. You would need a microscope to see them at all. So we didn't even know they existed. Great of you to turn out in the rain, and we're here looking for morels. The thing about it is, with 8 eyes, if I can count, we will do far better than you do with 2. So let's go to it and see what we can do. Spring is not the normal season for mushrooms, but there are 1 or 2 very special things. I look for dog's mercury. When I find it flowering like this, I know I'm there at the right time of year. But I also look for what sort of trees there are in the wood. This is ash. Under ash, when dog's mercury is out, you can find morels. Bingo. Yep, a morel. And in fact, 2 beauties. Look at that little beauty. This is a wonderful edible morel, a superb example. Morels are immensely desirable. At Harrods, they charge £160 a kilo for these beauties. But when you're foraging, you have to be very careful. There are all sorts of poisonous mushrooms out there that could get you. There's a false morel, which is poisonous, and even the morel itself contains toxins, and you must cook it properly before you eat it. This is an experiment. I've never done it before. It's an American recipe. Cut the morels and clean them, and then you dip them in a flour you've made by crushing crackers. Into the boiling butter and people say you shouldn't wet them, but I find that actually you can wash them and it doesn't do them any harm. They think water will take the flavour away, but for goodness sake, they were growing in the rain when we found them.
And now, as far as I'm concerned, the finishing touch. I love it. Look at it. Fantastic. Now we come to the moment of truth. Do we love American recipes or don't we? Okay, Naz, you found the first morel when we were in the woods.
I did.
You get to eat the first one of these.
Fantastic. They look delicious, Roger. I've never had a morel, so
Let's hope.
here we go.
Not sure? No, good. Is it good?
Exquisite. Wow.
Exquisite. How wonderful. I think
so
I'm going to have a go. Right. It isn't just the butter, though, is it, that gives them the wonderful flavour?
Must be the wine.
More of that later.